What is up, everybody, and welcome to an MMA crunch time before lock, midday Eastern time here. You're not Blender. It's Squirrel
No.
Patrol. John,
Yeah.
how's it going on this Saturday? We got 13 fights. We got our finger on the pulse in case anything happens, but couple weight misses. And I think this is an interesting slate because I think there's leverage spots all over the place. And you and I hit on things and didn't even talk about it. I looked at your article. Make sure you guys are subscribing and reading the articles because they do come out in plenty of time to kind of get that edge on the field, John. So what's your overall take on this slate? And, there's still some juicy prize pools out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great slate. I think people might be looking ahead a little bit to like UFC 292, which is going to be another great card. But like sometimes these fight nights are kind of disappointments, and it's like, I don't want to see these fights. Like these fights, I can't recall a card that's got 4 fights with a fighter that has a first round finish probability of 40% or more. It's kind of a mouthful, but there should be some early finishes in this card, and I guess it's in the Apex, right? The smaller cage. So.
Yeah.
Like that might be adding to the odds a little bit, but it should be exciting. And I agree. It's like an interesting like game theory slate, right? You know, if you're playing on FanDuel, playing on DraftKings, like there's going to be some fighters that are pretty popular. And then that like gives us some leverage opportunities. So yeah, I think it's going to be a great card. I love this time of day card too. Like I'm not up till 2 a.m. waiting for the main event to finish, right? Like I'll finish, right around late time, go out, get some drinks, and then like end the night like with the main event like earlier than 2 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting old in this game, John. And you and I mean, I'm 32, and I feel like at 12:30, the last fight hasn't even walked out yet. I'm like ripping my hair out, like holding my eyes open. But listen, I agree 100%. Very interesting slate. Make sure you guys are smashing that like button, getting your questions in the YouTube chat and in our Discord. We will prioritize the Discord questions. And listen, I think you and I will give away our combined consensus play. I'm going to tease, little teaser, John. I'll give away one of your plays that I agree with in your article if we get, what do you want, like 15, 20 likes, 25 likes, something like that. Smash the like button. We'll definitely give away one of those big dog plays that I'm going to 100% agree with you on. But
I don't like the video. I don't know how to like the video from in here.
I know. I don't either, but don't worry. We're going to get those likes. And I do think the starting point for me on any slate is the main event. But we talked about how there's so many action fights. How are you handling it in your lineups? Because I will be honest, I'm underweight regardless. And I think it's going to be one of those fights where you see LUQUE and Dos Anjos kind of, there's going to be some respect. Brazil and Brazil crime. And I can see this thing busting. A third or fourth round finish might not get the fighter there. I think there's more ways for this fight to bust than people imagine. People are drawn into the RDA perceived wrestling advantage, which there probably is there. And do you agree with me? I mean, obviously it's a starting point for any slate, but there's a lot of action fights on this slate.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I think you hit the nail on the head. I will say that I do have a strong take on the main event, and I'm overweight Dos Anjos and I'm underweight LUQUE, and that doesn't reflect how I feel the fight is necessarily going to go. I'm just terrified that I think LUQUE, could get that fourth round knockout. Right, he could get a spectacular fourth round knockout that we're talking about for weeks. That just doesn't score well for DraftKings purposes. And it like doesn't help our lineups. Like if he gets a third round knockout, that's just like any other fight on the card. And the fact that he's in the main event or that it might be spectacular, like it doesn't like affect your draft. Like you'd rather have another fighter in that spot in your DraftKings lineups, most likely. Dos Anjos, I feel differently about. I think if he wins the fight, like if he wins a 5-round decision, it could be high scoring. Like he's got volume, he's got volume and grappling. So I think if he wins the fight, I think he's more likely to end up on the winning lineup than LUQUE winning the fight, ending up on the winning lineup. If that makes sense. And because of that, like I'm overweight Dos Anjos and underweight LUQUE.
It makes 100% sense. And I think on this case, with both fighters being about 40% owned too, I don't think you need to make the decision here. Like, I think the decision making is well below this. Like, you can punt, scrubs, and studs is the way to go. And John, we already have 20 likes. Like, I'm going to start off. I want to give it, but I'm not going to give it yet. Not yet. Not yet. I think the starting point on this slate are two fighters. You talked about those first round equity. Here it goes. McKinney, Amaran, Roundtree. Those are your three fighters people are going to jam into their lineups. And I want to know, how do you kind of rank them? Because organically, Roundtree's fight weight class, a little bit slower pace, right? Typically, unless Dawkins does go out and wrestle, which I guess is in play a little bit. So I think that one's kind of third. And I think everybody's favorite, McKinney, is always an action fighter. He's going to at least get you to 20 to 30 points in the first, whether he finishes or not. And then Amaran's in an interesting spot because Kanjeho just isn't good, John. I mean, she has a head and arm throw. She could control late, but this is a spot where it's a get right. Amaran's in a, here you go. Here's the softball up the middle.
Yeah. I'm worried that the Amaran's not going to score that well unless she gets the first round win. And even then, like, she's super expensive. So like a submission first round win, like, doesn't necessarily, I mean, she's 9,100. Like, yeah, I mean, if she gets like 92 points or something, who is it? Diego Lopez, right? Like last week got like the 90 point win, the 90 point submission
zero.
Win.
The first
exactly.
ever,
like zero
actually
stats.
second ever. Do you remember the first one? Uriah Hall.
I think, who was it?
Uriah Hall. Chris Weidman with the leg kick and snapped his leg. The only two fighters to never have any category scored and get that first round equity.
Yeah. So I'm worried we could see that kind of thing from Amarim. I'm just worried that Terrence McKinney's going to lose.
Oh yeah.
So like I'm not, and then I actually think that like I'm not. I think I'm over projected ownership on Roundtree, but I don't love that either. So I actually I'm a little bit under on, I think, McKinney and Amarim, and I think I am just slightly over the field on Roundtree. Like I think most of the industry, like betting sharps that I've been listening to, kind of like Chris Dawkins in this fight. They think that him dropping down in weights is a good move. And I can see like so I don't know. I guess I've got to rank him like Roundtree. I mean, I don't. If McKinney wins this fight, it could be very high scoring. I just think it's a big leverage spot, right? It's like with Breeden, because McKinney
Breeden's not good.
Yeah,
but McKinney after round two, not good. I mean, that's the problem here, and it's a quick turnaround. I don't know if I've really seen him do this type of turnaround from July 15th to now. And it's like, where was he at? What was happening with him? But I do think he's a floor play. Like, he always goes out hot in that first round. I like Breeden. I think that he's like going to be the best leverage play. Obviously, we have McKinney at 45% owned. And yeah, it's a frustrating slate from that standpoint, John, because I could see any three of those fighters score the highest. But we do get all those likes. And I think the next spot for me is to give out what I read in your article, and I agree. Do you know who it is?
Bulgarian?
No, Bulgarian's a little bit obvious to me. JP Buys, man.
Okay.
JP Buys. I think he's got more equity. This is one of those ones where it's like, we can look like bums, okay? We got the likes. We have to say JP Buys doesn't have the best chin in the world. But I think his style should be to wrestle, should be get the back, look for a submission early. And I think at 6,600s, lineup construction-wise, you can do whatever you want. I mean, you are going to be inherently unique. What do you think about him? Because I don't think he's necessarily the best play in the world. I'm not touting him as go ahead and lock him in, but I do really think for tournament-wise, he's an elite play.
I think he's an interesting play. I don't think I wrote him up, though. He's not in my article.
Well.
I did Breeden, Bulgarian, Polyana, Vienna, and Juliana Miller. So yeah, GP Bays. He's super cheap. And I actually went back and I watched his last fight. I think it's like Cody Durden. And Bays just got like wrecked. And I think it is. I think it's Bays, not Buys. Like and I don't know why. I guess he's like, I think he's like South African or something.
He is.
But yeah, so I don't. He looked just super. The only like fight I could find on ESPN Plus of his was against Cody Durden, and Durden just like wrecked him. And so, but there is something to be said. I think we tend to underestimate salary, like the importance of salary,
Mhm.
which we have a new article that we haven't like promoted. It's like the simulations thing, and we haven't like really
Jamo.
promoted on RotoGrinders. But like looking at those simulations, I'm actually surprised at how often it indicates that like the expensive fighters get priced off of the expensive fighters, like the $9,500 fighters, like they get priced off the winning lineup way more than you would think. And then the cheaper fighters, right, the 6,600 JP Bays, like they land on the winning lineup like with any kind of win. And they're always like they always have 25% chance or so of winning, right? Like most UFC fights, the fighter has a 25% chance of winning at least, right? Like somebody slips on a banana peel. And yeah, he's going to be like 9% owned. Like if he wins this fight, he's almost certainly on the winning lineup. So he's going to have like half the ownership that he should.
I think I look at like buy low spots too, John. Right? Like I wish it was a little bit lower. I wish he was like plus 800. You know what I mean, to buy low. But at the same time, Marcus McGahee has a ton of bias towards him, right? He comes in, he's a fantasy darling in his first time. Now he's $200 more than anybody else, expected 33% owned. He's got to be perfect. And it's like, yeah, he's got an opponent that has had chin issues. Bai's definitely training with a better camp, but yeah, it's frustrating. Then there's another fighter there that we haven't even talked in that upper echelon, Josh Fremd versus Pickett. The pace of that fight is the biggest concern for me, but Pickett seems to give up some fantasy equity if he's getting controlled against the cage, getting taken down. Kind of a GPP type of fight.
Yeah, I actually kind of like Fremd. I ended up overweight on Fremd that I didn't expect to, but I think people let their biases, right? Like he missed weight by a ton, like 3 pounds or something. Um, so I don't know. I was surprised this fight is still going on. Like I thought both the fights where the guys missed weight were going to get canceled because I feel like they both missed by a pretty good amount. And I was actually wondering if like the Wonder Boy Thompson thing, where like they're not paying him because he didn't take the fight after his opponent missed weight. I wonder if that's going into the decision making of these fighters now, where they're like, well, I guess I'm going to take the fight. Take some of the opponent's purse, because I might not get paid otherwise, right? But like now Fremd's coming in and like he didn't look good on the scales because like he knew he was about to miss weight by 3 pounds. But that's kind of an advantage, right? Like I don't know. I mean, and I noticed like his win odds have gone up a little bit since the weigh-ins. So I kind of like Fremd. I mean, he's expensive, but I think he's going to probably be a little bit lower owned than our projected ownership. I think the missing weight like plays in a little bit, and then like Pickett, yeah, like at Pickett's price, if he wins, he's another guy like JP Bays, where if he wins, he's almost certainly on the winning lineup because he's
That's
so
exactly
cheap.
it. Yeah.
And you're probably not going to get necessarily the leverage with Pickett that you get from Bays, but it doesn't matter at 6,800. Like if he's doesn't matter what kind of win. I mean, other than an absurdly low scoring 40-point win, but that's unlikely.
Yeah, and I think I agree. It's any type of win will be good for you. And Pickett just doesn't do enough, though. I mean, he really doesn't do anything in his fights. I'd be surprised if he even got 70 points in any sort of decision type win.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's true. Actually, I'm looking now and like his 2 wins, I think, are 66, with like about 66 points.
he clinches. He likes to clinch against the cage, and then there's just nothing to be had. But the action fight that I think you and I were clicking on is that Bulgarian and Marshall. Marshall looked like coming into the UFC, he was going to be kind of like a fantasy darling himself, like point per dollar type of guy. I think the pace of that fight should be there. And another X factor, we talk about the X factor and Dawkins moving down at weight, potentially wrestling, potentially having some power. I mean, it'd be difficult to take out Roundtree, but regardless, Bulgarian's the X factor. He's coming in, beating up unknowns, first round potent finisher. The X factor, who the hell knows what he looks like in the second and third round? Nobody knows, but you cannot ignore 7,700 with that upside. And then on the other side of things, Marshall's the type of guy that could go out and wrestle for the second and third round and score 110 points. It's almost one of those types of fights.
Yeah, I think it's got probably the biggest range of outcomes on this league, right? Because we know basically nothing about Bulgarian. I mean, I can tell you what I know about Bulgarian. I went to his typology page. I'm like, that's a lot of first round finishes. I don't know. He's never seen the second round, I think, in his pro career. So Yeah, we don't know, but I mean, he has for a debuting fighter. I think he's got pretty good odds of a first round finish. Like probably that's just based off of his Tapology page too. Like people betting on that. But yeah, I think like Francis Marshall could get a low scoring win. Like maybe his thought process is I'm going to survive the first round, and do some wrestling. And it could be a low scoring win, could be a high scoring win. We don't know. Like we don't. I mean, if Bulgarian is a guy that gasses out in like the second round, maybe if Marshall's getting a late second round ground and pound finish, that breaks the slate. So I think it's going to be underowned. So I'm trying to get a bunch of Francis Marshall and a bunch of Bulgarian, just hoping that maybe the unfamiliarity, like Marshall doesn't have like the best game log, and Bulgarian has no game log. So I think this fight could go a little bit underowned. So
yeah, I mean Marshall's showing 30%, but I expect that probably to be lower because just lineup building alone, I don't think people are going to land in this spot, John. How are you handling the guy above him? Blackshear is going to be stone cold chalk, I'd imagine. 30, probably closer to 35, 40, because of that late notice replacement. 8,600 is a great price tag for him. I guess he's got multiple tools. He's got the wrestling in the back pocket, but I got to tell you, Johnson in his fights, I'm going to pull it up while you kind of bring your thoughts into it, but he's been taken down at will.
Yeah. No, I think you guys actually brought up a good point on the Ground and Pound podcast that like Johnson in his Contender Series was being controlled on the ground. Like that could rack up points for Blackshear. I don't think people are necessarily like considering that. He's got like a 114 point win. I think it was earlier this year, right? Yeah, against Lacerda. But his other two fights. One was I guess a draw. One was a loss. 30 and 40 points didn't look like necessarily super high scoring fights. So I think Blackshear's like underrated. I'm basically at the field with him because of the ownership, but like McKinney, I'm way under the field because of the ownership. So actually I like Blackshear, and I've got a little bit more Blackshear I think in the higher dollar, like in the qualifiers.
Typically, these type of spots too, John, you see like the minus 300 range, the minus 400 range, because of that late notice. And I feel like Jose Johnson's equity is going to be that first round, and then he's just going to slow. I think the volume isn't going to be there too. So, I agree with you. I think Blackshear is a great play. I don't think that's reinventing the wheel, though. I think he's a pretty clear value.
I think he's going to be owned, and he's a great price. But like I'd rather not fight like a good price, right? Like I think he's going to win the fight. I think he could be high scoring if he's going to win the fight, and he's a good price. Like maybe he's just a guy you need to have in your lineups. So I'm about even the field and this in the super large field contest, but I've got more of them in the higher dollar and like qualifiers.
Yeah, and we've got about 10 minutes out. I'm got my eye on the late notice news. Nothing yet, so we are good on that front. And you guys should know this broadcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. If you're in a legal sports betting state, take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. If you're in Tennessee, Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, then you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. Those of you in West Virginia, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, rather. In all other legal sports betting states, you can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Terms and conditions do apply. I would say a live betting.
We're going to have to add a half hour to the show just so you can do that read.
Hey, I have to do it. That's okay. We appreciate the sponsors, but hey, if I had a $1,000 live bet, John, I'm waiting for that Terrence McKinney and firing after that first round on $1,000 bet. We were just talking about that Blackshear fight. I think there's a fight right there, baby, that you tagged somebody, and I think I've got a strong lean on the other side that Lucendo is an interesting play. Lucendo is going to be very low owned, John. It's a blender type of play. I got to be honest, man. It's our buddy Blender because Viana likes to play the guard game. We have seen her do the Tabitha Ricci game where she just, okay, I'll pull guard, whatever, and then that control time and pitter patter. So I think that there's some interesting equity built in with Lucendo that people aren't talking about. And then low percentage armbar from guard. It's there for Viana.
Yeah, I think I'm overweight both these fighters. Yeah, I wrote up Viana in my article just because it's an underdog article. But it's good. It's not a super expensive fight, if that makes sense. Pollyanna probably gets there in a win. I think she's 7,700 on DK. But Luchendo, is 8,700. That's not super expensive, right? That's not like a $9,500 fighter. People do tend to skip over the women's fights, and sometimes that's warranted. Like sometimes they're low pace, low action. Like this could be a fight where you see a first round finish, right? Like I think Viana's got four first round finishes in the UFC. And that probably is like overstating her style, right? She's not always going to score that well, but she doesn't necessarily need to at her price for this card. And then Lucindo, I think 8,700. I think she could get the win as well, and then lands a pretty good chance sitting in the mid-range of pricing.
And I think she's a hidden type of gem. Like if that fight goes to she gets a takedown or Viana plays the guard game, she does the little ground and pound, and I don't know, something presents itself. There's a lot to be had, but there's a fight that I really am terrified of. Ntukwi and Dodson, man. Dobson isn't the best. I was shocked to see that Dobson's older than Tefon in this fight, in this spot. But Tefon just does not throw enough. It's almost like a Derek Lewis lower weight class that he has immense amount of power. He doesn't throw enough. And it feels like there's more tools for Dobson to win this fight. But it's all cooked into that finish equity.
Yeah, I think I'm under the field on this fight. This is the other one where I think it was Tefon missed weight, right? Yeah. And I'm not a huge fan of Tefon, and then I didn't like that now he's heavier, right? Like now he's like three pounds heavier. I think that could give him the advantage in the fight. I think I'm under the field on this fight just because of the pace and you have to be, if you're going to be over the field on somebody, you got to be under the field on somebody else. So I think this is potentially the fight that I'm the most underweight on. Let me see. And there was just like nothing that impressed me about like the pace of either of the fighters. So I got to cut somewhere, and I ended up like not having a lot of this fight.
I'd probably be drawn into the Dobson side plus 200 inside the distance compared to Ntukwi's plus 185. So it's like they're nearly a coin flip for either the guy to win inside the distance. I'd rather take the guy that's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I have more. I think I have about twice as much Dobson as Tefon in my large entry, like the 150 set.
Yeah, the interesting one is the first fight of the night. I mean, Juliana Miller, man, I shake my head. Like the girl goes for it, but she is not physical. But she's a wrestler, so it's like you scratch your head at this spot because her pace of fight projects to be very, very good. But I also see a spot where maybe she has a strong first round. Then Santos, finishes her in the second or third and doesn't score a tremendous amount of points. I think this fight has a lot of variables to it. A lower ownership combined about 35-40%. It's going to be a lower owned fight. And I mean, it could set the pace for the night.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to say about the fight other than I think it's going to be low owned. I think is it Santos's debut, or I think maybe her second fight? Debut. So we don't know a whole lot about her. I think Liam on the ground and pound was saying, she's got some jiu-jitsu credentials. We'll see. I mean, I don't think Juliana Miller is necessarily a pushover. I think she was one of the ones I put in my article. I think she's going to be super low owned. We tend to overestimate how our ability to predict how well the fight's going to score. So I think it's okay. I'm not crazy about either of these fighters in my high dollar qualifier stuff. But I do have them slightly over the field in my 150 set.
Yeah, Juliana Miller, in her debut fight, was 4 takedowns and finished in the third round. So that floor was there, and then getting exposed by Veronica Hardy or Veronica Macedo back then, 4 takedowns in that spot. It just doesn't look good at all. And it seems like the betting into the unknowns is a terrifying thing. Santos isn't somebody you're confidently clicking, but she's in play nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, we basically know nothing about her, right? Making the debut, but other than the betting lines, I basically play some of this fight just because the fighters are going to be lower owned than I think they should be.
Yep. Nope. It's about less than 5 minutes out, still all holding true here. We've pretty much gone through every fight. It sounds like you and I almost are going to have the same type of builds. A slate where I think people are drawn into the middle range, right? So I feel like mixing in those types of fights that we said, the Breedens, the Pickett's, the buys. I don't want to go to Conjejo, but like in any type of win, she's where that goes. And then I think people are going to be drawn into the Cub Swanson side of things too. Earlier in the week, I was trying to talk myself into it, but it would be like a kickboxing at range. He could out-volume Duadu. Duadu doesn't throw, but Swanson's almost 40. He's got no durability. It can take one shot. All the equities in Duadu. He's a lower owned pivot from Amaram, McKinney, Roundtree. So interesting spot there.
That's exactly. I have Duadu as basically a pivot. But I mean, you don't know. You don't know how the fight's going to go. So he could be high scoring in a win, but it's just not my favorite in that range. Cub Swanson actually, I think, is a little bit of a better play on FanDuel than on Draft DK. I know we mostly emphasize the DK prices and scoring, but I think Swanson's only $10 on FanDuel, so he ended up being my most used low-owned punt, I think, on FanDuel. But I guess I don't think he's going to win the fight. That's the issue, and this is another one I think could be low scoring, so tended to go a little bit underweight on it.
Yeah, on FanDuel, we both did tag JP buys. Just, that's why I was saying it earlier, because I mean, FanDuel, the salary, the pay up means a little bit more, right? He was $8. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like having a $4,000 fighter, I think, on DraftKings.
Yeah, it's unreal to get that type of price. And that's a buy low spot that I would like to have. I'm sure you would too. But yeah, any kind of bold take on this card outside of, we all kind of like to sprinkle the underdogs on this one, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. I think Breeden, I don't have a bold take. It's actually the opposite of a bold take. We're going to see at least one pretty big upset, almost certainly. I'm hoping it's Breeden because that knocks out a lot of the Terrence McKinney ownership. I don't have all my eggs in the Breeden basket, but it could be JP Bays, right? It could be Ruiz. We don't know. So just know there's going to be like one, unexpected outcome at least.
I agree 100% on that front. And next week we are in Boston. I don't believe there is going to be a live show. I'll be at the fights for 292 with 2 title fights. But John, I love when there's 2 5-round fights, don't you? I mean, it just provides so many more lineup possibilities. Smaller card though. I mean, it says 11 fights. I think there might be an Ultimate Fighter fight added, which would be great, but always scary when that happens. For producer Rob, for myself, for Squirrel Patrol, we will see you guys next week.